Cool. So yes, I just called this meeting because the issue for the graphic visualization of GitLab-ci YAML, it's a little big to do in one milestone in its current state. So I just wanted to see if there was sort of a boring solution that we could come up with that'll let us ship something in 13.4, and then we can iterate on it and ship the actual thing that we want to ship, going forward. So a couple of questions I had to begin with. There's actually no back-end engineers here, so but do we have everything we need from back-end to get this done? If that's a no, then obviously we'll need to get someone from back-end involved. I see your question there, Tao. That would have been great if I'd read it earlier.
I can see if Mattia or Marius can jump on real quick and we can come back to that question.
Yeah, unless anyone has an answer right now.
So I think part of the answer is that if it depends on what we want to show, I believe is part of the answer. Okay. So if we're not going to be expanding things.
And what do you mean by
expanding? Like if we're just taking the stage name and the job name that's rendered and showing that's in the YAML file. So then we don't need a backend engineer because we can get that, and I believe it's in the DOM anyway, and translate that into JSON and then use the JSON to draw the graph, and that should be fine. If we're trying to expand things, then it gets more problematic. But if we're fine with just being like, this is what it's going to show, then I think we're okay.
Yeah, that what you described as just not expanding things, and I'm glad you explained what you meant by expanding, then that's all we want for the very first iteration. I did have there is a thing about expansion that I want to ask about later, but maybe it's going to be moot based on agenda item number 2 of the second suggestion. But I think, so the answer to your question, Sam, is we do have everything we need with no additional back-end work to be done. Because,
as far as I know.
As far as we know.
And I will confirm that like by tomorrow morning, let's say. Probably end of day today, but I might get busy, so let's say by tomorrow. But I will go and check the code and confirm that that's the case.
And I will call that out. I'm going to update the description on the fly during this meeting. I will call it out that our expectation. And when you say expand, Sarah, how do I say that in a nutshell to say that's out of scope?
I don't know. I would probably say we won't be expanding includes or applying rules, right? We're just going to show the names of stages and jobs that are named in the YAML itself.
Okay, actually, let me call out a proposal that we're just displaying the names of jobs and stages and not expanding further details under jobs.
Well, and not necessarily including jobs that are included through includes, which I know I just said include like 8 times, but right, like if you look at the GitLab UI YAML, the GitLab-ci like R YAML for the GitLab project, you can see that we actually don't have like a list of jobs and stages. We just have all of these includes. So actually the visualization wouldn't show all of the jobs inside that.
Okay, so
it would probably just show the stages, and then we can see what we can show so that it's not like total, like, right, we might be able to show the stages in just something that says it includes this file and not expand that, and then, because that's in the YAML file. So basically, we cannot commit to showing anything that is not as it is exactly written in the YAML file, if that's another way to say
it. Yes, which was the whole, yes, that's almost so broad, but let me think about how to word that. I know what you mean exactly, but yeah,
Okay,
totally.
And you can ping me to like check it too when you're done. That's totally fine.
We'll do that. Thanks, Sarah. That makes total sense for me. I don't think there was an expectation to do any of that other complex stuff and go retrieve it. So I think we're good on that one.
I'm excited for when we can get to the part that we can do those things. Like, I think that part is super exciting. So I'm just drawing the line here so we know what we're doing now. It's not like a never thing. It's like a hopefully very soon we can do that thing.
Yes, and in fact, the things that we're de-scoping, I'm going to throw into a follow-up issue. Yeah, okay. All right, so
The second point, if I can grab that real fast, is my suggestion is that instead of showing it as a split screen with the file view, we put it in its own view that we can like add a link to the file to say visualize this, or even add a tab that'll flip between the like text visualization, the text file and the visualization of the graph. But that's just a little bit easier to build to start with. And the other reason I think it might be a good idea is that our ultimate goal isn't to show the visualization here, right? Our ultimate goal is to put it in the web IDE or someplace where the file is being edited. So worrying about changing this view now, I think, is also probably some extra work we might not have to do, and then we would end up supporting it in two places. And it seems like if our goal is to put it in the web IDE, then the first thing to do is to go ahead and make it available here, because adding a little link about it is fine. And then that can even like drive to the web IDE eventually, but now put it in its own view.
Okay, and I want to, let me share my screen because I have a question for you about that. And I totally think that makes it even simpler for the very first iteration. Does it make it harder? Does it add complexity to add like if we had this, the YAML as the first tab and another tab, is adding tabs to a page like this difficult? Do we know?
In this case, I do not believe so. There might be pages where there's hidden difficulty, but it's usually not. Like we have a view component that the cases it would be complex is if it only has HAML for some reason, if the code causes a problem, but otherwise we have a tab component that we can put in and that handles all the switching between it. So it should not be a lot of work.
I'd also say if it's only HAML, it's going to be complex regardless of whether we have a tab or not, right? Because the actual thing needs to be in view. We can't do visualizations in HAML, right?
Okay.
Right.
And then the alternative is another option that's not a lot more complex, giving them a link to go see it. Because I guess they could open the same page in two windows and then have one with either tab displayed. I think that would work. Vitika, do you have any opinion on this? Well, you have to rework this design if we agree to.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine, because since we are not going to move ahead with this same editor and we would want to move to web IDE, so this duplication of efforts, I mean, it would just increase the work. So I agree. I mean, we can work on a workaround for this regular view, like a tab, or I think a tab should be fine because they can easily toggle between the two.
Yeah, or have two windows open and have it. Oh yeah, right. Because then you would still see it's the same page open twice and as. But anyways, if you're good with that, then what you'll have to do is rework this design to show a tab for each of the two panels here.
Okay.
Okay.
Although it's not, if you have a bunch of other stuff on your plate, like if we're agreeing it's going to be a tab, this is also the kind of thing that like, there are other bigger plans that are more important than you drawing me a picture of it with a tab. I can also, do a tab and send you a screenshot and be like, like we can do that smaller iteration too, if you have bigger things to work on. That's like totally fine.
Are we saying, and I also only suggest that also if it might be another front-end engineer working on this, but are you saying you're definitely going to be the one to implement this this feature, Sarah?
I think so.
Okay. Okay.
I don't see why not. And if when Fred comes back, I pass it off to him, I can handle the communication on our team. That's not a big deal.
Okay. All
I
right.
did the whole DAG graph and he had done a bunch of work on it. So
Mhm.
if he really wants to work on this, I might pass it to him next week so he can have fun laying things out because I know he likes to do that. But
Mhm.
I will make sure that this is communicated.
Okay, and what I'm going to do, Vitika, and I realize this later after you copy this over, things that we agree on, both the out of this discussion and then just the original elements that we're not changing, I actually should be summarizing it in the description itself.
Description,
So
yeah.
I'll do that. I'll call it out in the proposal, just a list of the elements in the design, including that there'll be tabs and not the initial view of it side by side. Okay.
Would it be, I mean, this is totally up to you, Tal, but would it be easier if instead of modifying this issue to be the boring solution and then creating a follow-up issue, would it be easier to just create another issue that is for the boring solution and say this works towards this larger issue?
Vitika, actually, we talked about that before, and there's a couple reasons why I didn't want to create. I was going to actually promote this to an epic and create some smaller issues under it. I think there's, and simply because there was going to be a lot of feedback added to this issue that is not going to pertain to the MVC. And so there are a couple reasons why I didn't want to do that. There's a lot of folks watching this one, and based on the upvotes too. If I promoted it, I would lose the upvotes on the epic. And then also if I create a separate issue, I'd have to redirect everyone to that one. But
I don't think we need to redirect everyone to that issue, but a newer issue just talking about what we're making would be helpful. I realize this is like a certain tension, but like there's also the understanding about like what page this was on and what exactly it was entailing. And a lot of that is because this is like, I feel like this issue is trying to do too much.
yeah.
So I think making a new one and linking it to be like, hey, this is where we are literally making the most boring solution this time is actually makes issues more useful as an engineer, because like this issue is useless to me essentially.
Yeah,
As it stands.
The other thing, Sarah, is this issue, this first iteration, we're probably not going to continue building on it. If I knew this had a future after a first iteration, because I'm going to guess we're going to eventually do future iterations in the Web IDE editor and not continue this. And I don't want this to continue to be built out with an epic and a lot of sub issues, like it's going to have a life of its own, but really it's a interim solution that let's figure out what we want to do for the initial iteration, and I'll look through this issue because you're right, there's so many ideas in this, and most of the ideas that we got from the feedback is not going to go into this simple editor at all. So it's, yeah. And if I made this into an epic, it takes away from the other epic for building things out in the Web IDE, which already exists with its own set of issues. Okay. The other thing I wanted to add, so basically the question I had about expanding kind of is moot now, Vitika. If it's going to be a separate view, we won't even bother with this.
Yeah.
The expanding, the icon to expand or the icon to zoom in or zoom out.
Right.
Yep. So I will list out in the proposal that it'll be not a side-by-side view as the design shows, which will be reworked, but a separate tabs view. The other thing, I had another question. If you actually look at the design, this page 2 of the design, the latest one, we did mention, okay, so we descope number 4. Other than simplifying it by not having it in a side-by-side view, which also, by the way, Vitika does away with our question about the slider adjustment. We won't need that feature. Is there anything else we can do to make it simpler? Is it showing the visual connection between two jobs that has one dependent on the other because of the needs keyword? Does that make it any more complex, Sarah?
It certainly makes it slightly more complex. my plan is to do a version without the lines and then do another MR with the lines so that if all of it doesn't make it in the first milestone, we're still shipping something.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I
it is
just
a little
realized,
more, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
sorry, I realized today, I mean, Dimitri dropped a comment that what would happen when we would allow linking jobs from the same stages. And I figured that I am kind of taking care of that visualization in some other issue, which is called bring DAG insights into pipeline visualization. But then I might have to make a few changes here as well if we enable that. Like if later we would show jobs from the same stages connected to each other, so the stages column might have to go away.
I think that's okay. I am sort of keeping in mind the designs from there. So like one of my ultimate hopes for this project as well is that right now the pipeline pages, that big pipeline graph as we've seen in some other CSS stuff lately is like this fixed layout that makes it super, super brittle and you like sneeze on it and it breaks. And so my goal is that by building up this version, which will be a more relative layout, we can eventually use that to create the new version. So the goal in like doing this code isn't to create something entirely different, but to like rework what we can so that like I'm thinking about how we can make how we can make that a unified view. Because in the end, it is, right? It's the same view with different functionalities. So we won't be showing like job statuses in one, but we should like be fundamentally under the covers, making them the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good decision because I mean, experience-wise, also they won't have to switch their way of thinking when they look at these visualizations, and effort-wise, also from the on the development side, it might get easier to work on.
Can you find that one that you're thinking of? Is that design already done? Or
yeah, I had it here somewhere.
well, you find that, Sarah?
It's linked in this issue
it is?
that you have opened.
Which one is it? Is that the graphic visualizations for non?
Yeah, so I replied to Dimitri's comments, and in one of the comments, I have highlighted that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've taken care of visualization is the link, the very last comment.
Okay.
That one needs a little rework, like I'm trying to find some colors to represent stages, but otherwise it's kind of done.
The great colors, the great colors battle. I think it's so funny. People are like, what do these colors mean? Like making colors that are meaningful that don't conflict with anything else is, I think, a hard problem, but there will be a good solution. I know it.
Hey, Vitika, I went to that issue, bring some DAG insights in the pipeline view. Are you saying for that, what were you saying from that view that was relevant to what we're doing? Because that one, you were mentioning that to show the linkage of jobs within the same stage, but the proposal, should I be looking at the design, not just what's in the description?
Yeah, the design. So in the design, you will see that it's the layout is based on the execution level and not exactly what stage they are. So you would see a job from the first stage at the second level because it depends on a job from the same stage.
Right, and for that layout, we can use some of the same data parsing that we use for the DAG to get the information about which layer items are in. That's like a thing that the D3 gives us, so we can always use that to lay things out.
You know, when I look at this one, it does look, okay. Yeah, okay, understood. All right, and then one last question I have for you, Sarah, is one of the elements of the design for the issue we're talking about has a different background, like it looks grayed out when it's a stage without any jobs, which requires, I guess, the front end code to to go through the entire YAML file to figure out which ones don't have. Is that making more complex, or can we leave that in as one of the design elements? Stages show
sorry
as
to interrupt.
what?
My internet broke for a while. So are you talking about the highlighting that we're providing in the graph?
Yeah, for the stages that have
yeah,
jobs versus
like-
the ones that don't.
I think for visualization, that would not be required, because when users are looking at this visualization under the pipelines tab, they would perform different set of interactions. So they would want to know the dependencies and all of that. But they wouldn't be using the same interactions when they're creating the file, is what I believe.
Sorry.
So I think what Tao was asking
Yeah.
is, do we, for this version of the visualization, which is static, do we need to show that some, can we, and do we need to show that some of the stages don't have jobs? And there's two things that I don't know. So one, I don't know if it's possible to make a CI file that has a stage with no jobs in it. I'd have to check if that would pass our lint. I mean, it might not, I don't know. But if it does, I think it should be okay.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking, although it looks visually, I mean, it looks nice that the stages that have jobs are a darker background. It's also just visually obvious if you don't want to fiddle with changing making one look disabled, one active. It's also visually obvious that there's no jobs under them too, right? It makes it simpler not to do the background variation.
That's true.
Yes, but to draw it, we need to know if there's jobs underneath it. So assuming it's possible to have a stage with no jobs, then making that on the front end isn't really a problem.
Okay.
Because we have to know to draw it. So like we can essentially just be like, does this group have children or not? And it should be fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. It is, okay. That's fine. It does add a little more to the effort, but I think that's all. Then the rest, we already talked about all the elements of the design. We're not going to have a slider because we're not going to have a side-by-side view. We will show active stages that have jobs will be a darker background than stages that don't have jobs. But we won't, I would like that we don't hide the stages that don't have jobs, still display them somehow. And then I think you said, Sarah, it's doable to have a connector between dependent jobs.
I believe so. That is definitely a next layer. So we will make it its own MR.
Yeah.
So that we can ship the first thing and then ship the next thing. That's the thing that I'm like, I cannot tell you right now 100% will go in 13.4, but we'll see what we can do about it and separate them off so it doesn't hold up everything else.
Okay. I'm going to rework the description on this issue. And then I'm going to make a note in this issue that the future iterations will, I'm going to point them to the epic for building on this in the web IDE, the editor in the web IDE. I don't think we're going to iterate on this, but not as a pure visualization. Because there's not much more that we, are going to take this, right, in the simple editor. Yeah.
That's right. And then regarding the web IDE, as I've mentioned before, I got Dennis, who's working on it, to schedule a deep dive about the new stuff that's coming up, because he's working on making it easy for people to plug in visualizations like this, also to like render markdown and a bunch of other stuff. So we started working on what that's going to look like from an engineering perspective, so that when we're ready to work on it, we like understand the ground.
Sounds good. And this initial version, I know we've gotten a lot of feedback already, but this initial version will let us kind of learn some things about this and then really start to take off on the making the feature even better in the next in the web editor, in the web IDE editor. Okay. I'm good. I don't have any other questions. Anything for me?
It's 3:01.
Okay. I'd just say,
or 1 past the hour.
I've been trying to type everything in the agenda, but my typing skills are nowhere near the level of Ricky and other people. So I'm really glad we recorded this.
Yes, yes. What I'll do is I'll ping y'all in the team channel when I've updated the issue, and then you could take a look at it. We're good to go. Based on everything, and then after I have it updated, Sarah, you could probably take a look at it and throw a weight on the issue. Okay.
Tao, there's another meeting on your channel.
Yeah.
People are waiting.
Oh, okay.
Bye. Bye, everyone. See you in an hour.
Thanks all. See you later.